Warning: this podcast contains descriptions of events that may be upsetting. Please take care while listening.
Come to order. The Honorable Stephen Hitler, presiding judge.
It's Wednesday, July 2nd, 2025.
This is CR 0124316665. Defendant is present in custody with counsel.
Bryan Kohberger, a fleet of lawyers, family members of all four victims, the press, and a collection of random others are all packed in the Ada County Courthouse. This hearing had not been on the books.
The man accused of the University of Idaho quadruple murder accepting a plea deal less than 2 months before his trial. Multiple outlets reporting Bryan Kohberger agreeing to plead guilty to all counts. He accepts 4 consecutive life sentences and waives all right to appeal, avoiding a possible death penalty.
Guilty of all 4 murders, life in prison, no parole, no chance for appeal. After 2.5 years of legal posturing, no one saw this coming.
We are here today to entertain a change of plea. I, like most everyone else, learned of this plea agreement Monday afternoon and had no inkling of it beforehand.
That Monday afternoon, our news team was busily putting together stories to air that night. We were short-staffed. Everyone agreed to get their vacations out of the way before what we thought would be a 3-month trial. We had planned nonstop coverage. Then, someone at a sister station pinged me. ABC News was breaking in with a special report, and all of a sudden, none of that would be necessary. We were blindsided. But much more importantly, the families of the 4 victims were caught off guard as well.
One of the victims' families, Gonsalves family, confirming the plea deal, saying they didn't expect this and they're furious the state of Idaho failed them.
The Gonsalves family was not alone. 2 of the 4 families, the Gonsalves and Kernodle families, did not like the plea deal. The purpose of this hearing was for the judge to accept or reject it. And a mob of people on the internet were joining the voice of dissent. They were mad that the families weren't closely involved in making the deal, that the prosecution was giving up the death penalty, even though some thought they had a slam dunk case. The Gonsalves family, with a barrage of supporters, were upset that Kohberger wasn't required to give a full confession. He wouldn't even have to lead police to the murder weapon. In their eyes, the prosecution was cutting off any hope that Kohberger would get the punishment he deserved, and cutting off hope that they would get the answers they needed. So they publicly called for the judge to intervene. Judge Hitler started the day's hearing addressing the matter. Turns out, he was angry too.
I want to point out that there have been calls by some for the public to contact me and my office in an attempt to influence my decision-making in this case. This has been extraordinarily disruptive for court staff and the ability for them to get work done, not only in this case, but in other cases. It's also highly inappropriate. A court is not supposed to, and this court will never, take into account public sentiment in making an opinion regarding its judicial decisions in cases.
The courtroom was silent.
I have not read any of the numerous messages, nor listened to any of the numerous voicemails that have been sent to me and my staff. Those have all been forwarded to security and, where appropriate, to law enforcement.
He informed them that the elected prosecutor is the sole authority in deciding if the death penalty is pursued, not the judge. His role was only to decipher if the plea was made freely and intelligently, and that the defendant understood the ramifications. Once that issue was addressed, the hearing continued on. Everyone waited to hear Kohberger say the word, guilty. To some, it would provide closure. Others believed it prevented that very thing.
The surprise plea deal means Kohberger avoids the death penalty, which doesn't sit well with some of the victims' families.
There will be no jury trial. Mixed reaction from the victims' families. Kaylee Gonsalves' father insisting this isn't justice.
We didn't agree on anything. He only negotiated with the murder of our children.
The Kernodle family also reportedly disappointed with the deal. I reached out to Ethan Chapin's family in Skagit County, no word today, but on Tuesday, they said they support the agreement.
Madison Mogen's family prepared a statement that was read by their attorney.
We support the plea agreement 100%. While we know there are some who do not support it, we ask that they respect our belief that this is the best outcome possible for the victims, their families, and the state of Idaho.
On one hand, it would save the families from months of unspeakable details, horrific photos of the crimes that can't be unseen, and then a decade or more of appeals. On the other hand, a door was shutting, and the answers they wanted were about to be locked away on the other side, maybe forever.
Michelle, the big question dates back to November of 2022, and why? Any insight on motive?
Yeah, that really is the question, right? I mean, that's what everybody wants to know, particularly this family. But we got nothing on that today about motive.
This is Gem State, the Idaho Student Murders. I'm your host, Ryan Oswald. Today, we still don't know why Bryan Kohberger killed 4 college students in 2022. But we have some insights as to why he ultimately admitted to it. And it's those details that get us a little bit closer to understanding what really happened that night in November.
Kohberger's click history on Amazon, where he purchased a large K-bar military-style knife, sheath, and sharpener.
Kohberger's autism diagnosis.
The white Hyundai Elantra police have been looking for appears on camera, driving past the King Road residence multiple times in the 3 o'clock hour.
Accusing police of gathering some of the evidence illegally.
They plan to argue, quote, alternative perpetrators ahead of trial.
Prosecutors also plan to introduce a selfie Kohberger took on his cell phone hours after the killings, which shows him smiling and giving a thumbs up.
This is the sound of the house on 1122 King Road coming down. It happened about 1.5 years before Bryan Kohberger changed his plea. The university took possession soon after the murders and made their plans known.
We have not made it a secret since the time that the house was given to us that our intent was to demolish the house.
In December of 2023, they followed through.
University officials say it is a symbol that is holding the community back, and while they will never forget the victims, the house itself belongs in the past.
Some of the victims' families were outraged. They thought the house still might have held crucial evidence. Neither the prosecution nor the defense objected to the house being demolished. But in a way, to the families, it might have felt a little like the plea deal that would come later, like a door that was being shut, with the answers they desperately needed suddenly torn away from them. A connection to their children knocked down and hauled away. If there was evidence in the house that hadn't been documented, honestly, the prosecution didn't need it. They had more than just physical evidence.
The white Hyundai Elantra police have been looking for appears on camera, driving past the King Road residence multiple times in the 3 o'clock hour.
Surveillance cameras of nearby homes and businesses caught Kohberger driving by the house 3 times that night. In the previous 4 months, he had driven by 23 times. The night of the murders, Xana had ordered food delivery, and the DoorDash driver dropped off the food around 4 a.m. It is estimated that Kohberger entered at 4:07. During the estimated 13 minutes he was in the home, he crossed paths with one of the tenants.
One of the most surprising things we did learn is one of the surviving roommates may have seen the killer on his way out towards the back sliding glass door. Many had previously believed that some of the surviving roommates had slept through the attack.
According to the roommate, the man had a lean build and bushy eyebrows.
Around 4 a.m., surviving roommate Dylan Mortensen reportedly heard someone who she thought was Kaylee Gonzalez saying, "There's someone here," and a male voice saying, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Mortensen opened her door a 3rd time after she heard someone crying in Xana Kernodle's room, seeing a masked man dressed in all black walking past her as she stood in a frozen shock phase, then locked herself in her bedroom.
2 surviving roommates exchanged texts during the attack and shortly after. The roommate who crossed paths with Kohberger described him as having on a ski mask. They're identified by their initials in court documents. DM. I'm not kidding, I am so freaked out. BF. So am I. DM. My phone is going to die. BF. Come to my room. Run. The defense tried to get the witness's statement thrown out, claiming that her account was unreliable and irrelevant. The judge rejected that request. That was sort of a trend in the months leading up to the proposed trial date. Every bit of damning evidence was challenged, the most significant being the DNA.
DNA matching Kohberger's profile was found on the button snap of a knife sheath near the bed next to one of the victims after the murders. Records also state agents recovered trash from his family's home in Pennsylvania. DNA from that trash matched a profile obtained by the knife sheath that was found in the home.
Bryan Kohberger's attorneys spent hours in a pretrial hearing attempting to cast doubt in the collection methods and scientific profiles as a way to delay his case.
What does that tell us about the STR profile?
After hours of testimony on the science of it all, reporters in the courtroom said a judge did not find sufficient reason to delay the case.
The defense also pointed out that the method law enforcement used to link the DNA at the scene to Kohberger was new and untested.
Kohberger's attorneys asking Judge Stephen Hippler to throw out a significant share of the evidence in the case as it relies on what they call an unconstitutional genetic investigation process relying on investigative genetic genealogy.
It is a new tool, but Judge Hippler was not about to throw away the evidence the tool uncovered. So the defense gave another reason to throw it out: Kohberger's privacy.
The defense has questioned how the DNA was collected and raised concerns over the use of a private database to identify the match, leading to what they believe is an infringement of Kohberger's privacy.
That also didn't work. The GEDmatch site used by detectives to find a link between DNA at the scene and DNA submitted by Kohberger's family member to a site like 23andMe was private. It was not to be used by law enforcement. Judge Hippler agreed with that, but pointed out that it was an infringement to the site's policy, not the Constitution. As far as Kohberger's privacy rights to his DNA left behind at the crime scene and in the trash can at his parents' house, the judge said Kohberger forfeited any reasonable expectation of privacy in both instances. He left his DNA at the scene to be found, and he threw it away in the trash at his parents' home. Then there was Kohberger's online activity.
Court filings reveal some of the evidence prosecutors plan to introduce if the trial of Bryan Kohberger had gone on as scheduled. That includes details on Kohberger's click history on Amazon, where he purchased a large K-bar military-style knife, sheath, and sharpener.
Law enforcement got Kohberger's Amazon click history through a warrant. A click history is exactly what it sounds like. It's your activity when you click on links or elements within an app or on a website. Bryan Kohberger's click history on his Amazon account showed that he had purchased the knife, sheath, and sharpener before the murders. Also, he had looked at knives after the murders, the state believed to replace the one he had used in the murders. The defense requested the Amazon evidence be thrown out because, in part, of Amazon's algorithm. It suggests products. It's not always the user who seeks them out. In the end, it fell flat. One of the more interesting tactics the defense pushed was an alternative perpetrator theory. They claimed to have evidence that someone else did it. Or, more specifically, they claimed to have evidence that any one of 4 people might have done it. Judge Hippler wasn't going to allow an alternate perpetrator to be floated half-baked.
Now they have to justify its admissibility to the court in what our legal expert says might prove a complicated process.
Provide me with whatever actual evidence you have that supports those allegations, rather than just allegations.
The evidence presented was shot down forcefully. The evidence is entirely irrelevant, Judge Stephen Hippler said. He said there was not, quote, a scintilla of competent evidence connecting them to the crime, end quote. It seems the only thing the defense could provide on the 4 alternate perpetrators was that they knew one or more of the victims. Also, the 4 had all been cooperative with law enforcement and had been cleared. The defense kept throwing things against the wall. They unsuccessfully challenged cell phone data, surveillance footage. They tried to get the death penalty taken out due to Kohberger having an autism diagnosis. There were so many requests by the defense for continuances to delay the trial, it was hard to keep them straight. But one seemed to gain traction with Judge Hippler.
The other reason that a continuance is appropriate in this case is based on the media coverage, the Dateline issue that has been talked about in this courtroom before, and what's yet to come.
An episode of NBC's Dateline revealed previously unseen surveillance footage from a neighbor. It showed that he had visited the area many times leading up to the murders. Also, the episode contained information about Kohberger's movements before and after the crime via data from his cell phone. Internet searches made by Kohberger were revealed. He searched Ted Bundy, pornography containing the search words sleeping and drugged. He had searched the question, can psychopaths behave pro-socially? The information, again, not previously public, violated a gag order. The reason the gag order existed was to prevent a jury pool from becoming tainted.
There's a book set to be released just a few weeks from now to be followed by a docuseries on Amazon Prime. There's a claim that there's inside sources that provide information in this case. At the very least, the moment we start attempting to select a jury in this case, those things are going to be on everybody's TV, everybody's social media feed. That is, in and of itself, an exceptional reason for us to have a continuance to let those things play out for a while.
The judge ordered there be an internal investigation to find the leaker. Hippler said the leak potentially violated Kohberger's right to a fair trial and could prolong the case. But in the end, it may have been this argument made by the prosecution that ultimately struck down the delay.
The other thing I would mention with respect to the publicity is that it puts us at the whim of the media. Every time there's a breaking story, every time there's a new book or a new documentary, are we going to continue the trial indefinitely? And that seems to be the danger in what the defense is asking for.
The case was just too big. There was no guarantee as to when the feverish buzz would, as the defense put it, play out. Perhaps because they had exhausted all ideas, and because they were met again and again with rejection from a judge whose obstinance seemed impenetrable. They changed tactics. Their goal was to save Bryan Kohberger's life.
Has your attorney done everything you've asked them to do?
Yes.
Are you satisfied with their representation of you?
Yes.
Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?
Yes.
Back in court at the plea hearing, a very matter-of-fact Kohberger continued to assure the judge that he knew what he was agreeing to, and that he was, in fact, guilty. Then the prosecution laid out exactly what he was guilty of.
The state's evidence, as an overview, would show that back in March of 2022, when the defendant was residing at his parents' residence or was residing back in Pennsylvania, his home state, he purchased online a K-bar knife and sheath with an Amazon gift card that he had purchased shortly prior to the purchase of the knife, sheath, and sharpener.
Starting in July, between the hours of 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., Bryan Kohberger started to circle the house on King Road.
I will acknowledge also, we do not have evidence that the defendant had direct contact with 1122 or with residents of 1122, but we can put his phone in that area on those times.
On November 13th, his plan was carried out.
The defendant entered the residence, went to the third floor, and with a knife, killed Madison Mogan and Kaylee Gonzalez. The defendant, as he left that room, for whatever reason, ended up leaving, or the sheath for a K-bar knife was left on the bed next to Madison Mogan's body.
Xana and Ethan were on the second floor.
As the defendant was either coming down the stairs or leaving, he encountered Xana, and he ended up killing her, also with a large knife. Ethan Chapin, Xana's boyfriend, was asleep in their bedroom, in her bedroom, and the defendant killed him as well.
Before leaving, a roommate awoke and opened her door. She saw him leave toward the kitchen, where he ultimately exited through the sliding glass door. The time was 4:20 a.m.
On a surveillance camera for 1112 King Road, which is immediately next door to the west of 1122, leaving the area at a high rate of speed. And if the court were to see that, or anybody in this courtroom would see that, you can see the car almost loses control as it makes the corner, heads north, and then turns to go south on Walenta, which is one of the only ways to get out of that part of town.
Kohberger took a lot of back roads. He seemed to just be cruising. He finally went home to Pullman, which was less than 20 minutes away from the crime scene, at around 5:30 a.m. Then, around 9 a.m., he went back to King Road.
Mr. Kohberger's phone returned to the area of King Road. We don't know exactly what he did, but it returned to that area. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning. He was there for about 10 minutes and then returned to his Pullman residence. About 9:30, the state's evidence will show, evidence taken from the defendant's phone, that he took a selfie of himself on his phone in what appears to be the bathroom of his Pullman apartment with a thumbs up.
Then, the covering up. At some point after the crimes, he attempted to delete or alter his purchase history with Amazon. He also called the DMV to change his car registration from Pennsylvania to Washington. The prosecution thinks this is because Pennsylvania cars do not have a front license plate, much like the cars in the surveillance footage. He finished his semester at Washington State and returned to Pennsylvania for the holidays. Police were there, collecting trash.
Lab experts there were able to identify DNA on a Q-tip as coming from the father of the person whose DNA was found on the knife sheath.
The prosecutor went on to say that they then searched Kohberger's apartment and car, which were notably sterile.
That was part of the defendant's plan in covering up this. The defendant has studied crime. In fact, he did a detailed paper on crime scene processing when he was working on his pre-doctorate degrees, and he had that knowledge and skill.
And then the charges were read, and the word many had waited to hear was uttered from the killer's mouth.
Murder in the first degree as it relates to the murder of Madison Mogen.
Guilty.
For the murder of Kaylee Gonsalves.
Guilty.
The first degree murder of Xana Kernodle. The first degree murder. And how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
And that was it.
After 2 years of court dates, dozens of appeals, and hundreds of hours planning a complicated trial, the plea deal hearing lasted under 45 minutes.
Years of a dark, painful wind-up, ending in under an hour. They set a date for sentencing, and the media went to work.
Developing tonight, Bryan Kohberger now faces life in prison after pleading guilty this morning to the murders of 4 University of Idaho students in 2022.
But they had one more opportunity to hear from the killer himself.
We may learn more, though, coming up on the sentencing, because at that time, Kohberger would have the opportunity to address the court. So we'll see if he does.
Next time on Gem State, a reckoning for the crimes at 1122 King Road.
If you hadn't attacked them in their sleep, in the middle of the night, like a pedophile, Kaylee would have kicked your ass.
I want to just be out in the woods with you just so I can teach you about loss and pain.
This is Gem State, the Idaho Student Murders. I'm your host, Ryan Oswald. Please take a moment to like and subscribe wherever you are listening. It really helps us out. You can follow our continuing coverage of this case on idahonews.com. Gem State is written, produced, and edited by me, Ryan Oswald. Ryan Hawes is KBOI's news director. Mitch Hansen is our senior producer. Brian Peters is our associate producer and fact checker. Legal support by Chase Bales. Production coordination by Anna Nicole Wadges. Special thanks to KBOI, KEYE, Como, and KVAL news stations for the use of their coverage. Pete Genesini is director of network podcast programming. Rich Cook is the head of audio at Amp Media.